After a break of few months, let me welcome all of you back to another episode of Thinkers Unlimited. And it's both my pleasure and privilege to welcome Marcus Dimbleby for today's interaction. Marcus undoubtedly has had a very unique and varied career in the Royal Air Force, serving as a fighter controller. He enjoyed tours with the Royal Marines and Royal Navy, an airfield director at a major RAF transport hub, the Joint Force Headquarters doing strategic and operational planning, and finally, as one of the national executives responsible for the air security of the United Kingdom at the time of the Olympic Games in London in 2012, working closely with Prime Minister Cameron and the Cabinet Office. Throughout his military career, he learned, applied, and taught the tools and techniques of red teaming in many guises. With extensive experience gained as a senior military officer, Marcus seamlessly moved into the business world in London, initially as a senior manager at a major consultancy, then an independent contractor, becoming the head of Agile at Lloyds Banking Group, before then becoming a business owner and partner, leading on major business transformations, predominantly in the financial sector, as well as government and the oil and gas sector. A highly entrepreneurial, passionate, and pragmatic transformation leader and coach, Marcus is very people-oriented. He believes that whatever business you are in the people business, and focuses on enabling enterprise-wide business transformation through effective change management, evolved leadership behaviors, and optimized ways of working that lead to the required mindset and culture shift. And of course, the application of red team thinking at all levels. Along with his military skills and training, Marcus completed postgraduate studies in strategic leadership and management, and also business management, improving performance and managing change. He's a former chair of school governors, lives in St. Albans, UK, and is married with a family of 4, where he also applies his military training and red team techniques in an attempt to stay one step ahead of his kids. Thanks a ton for accepting my invite to share lessons from your life's journey with us.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for that introduction. It's quite a varied background indeed when I hear it read out back to me. But it's lovely to be here, Prashant, and really looking forward to our conversation today.
So let's get this conversation started. What should leaders do and not do to thrive in today's VUCA world?
In today's VUCA world. So VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's a sort of new normal that we're seeing, certainly post-COVID. And it's become a popular phrase over the last 5 years, although it's been around since the 1980s. Again, it came from the US Army War College, which described the environment the military was facing post the very Cold War aspects of a linear battle. So now looking at Afghanistan, Iraq, and all the other interventions we've seen, they're very volatile and complex. And that's now moved into the business world that we're seeing in society today. So what should people do or not do? Well, in these highly complex environments where things are changing so often, what you don't do is keep reacting. What you don't do is keep knee-jerk reacting and putting out fires as they occur, which tends to be what happens. And if people aren't slowing down, and one of my favorite mantras is slow down to speed up, then you're always going to be constantly reacting. You're not going to allow yourself to have time to get ahead of the game. And in a complex environment, you need to be probing. There are so many unknowns out there that if you don't know and you continue proceeding forward like then things are going to start going wrong very quickly. So my advice to leaders out there is slow down to speed up. Stop if you have to do, and gather, again, another great military term, that's situational awareness. Understand what's going on around you in this situation. Appreciate that how it is today may be different tomorrow. And that's why we talk then about iterative decision-making. And it's, again, so sort of old school that when I make a decision as the executive leader, that decision stands. And because I've made it, it must therefore be correct. And it may be correct at the time, but tomorrow it could be wrong. And you now have to have the humility to accept that, but also realize that when you make that decision in the first place. Because if you make your decision Thursday morning, then disappear and play golf for the weekend, expecting everything to be the same on Monday, and the execution happening without fault, then you're delusional in this day and age, because that VUCA environment will come in like a wrecking ball and completely derail your plans. And we see this constantly. COVID is almost something in the past now with what we've seen evolve since then, with the evolution of, global warming. We're seeing war breaking out. And one of the final letters we add to VUCA now is H for hyperconnectivity, because what we're seeing is that decisions made are instant released out there through social media, through the press. Activities that happen in certain parts of the world, because we are so now globalized and hyperconnected, they are having a massive impact. So who would have thought, if we'd have said 12 months ago that there was going to be war in the Ukraine, it's going to double the gas prices and have major impact on people's livelihoods? People would look at you like you came from another planet. Like, really? But this is the whole point of this red teaming concept of planning for the worst, understanding what might happen as the dominoes topple. So again, going back to how you operate in a VUCA environment, one, slow down. Two, start to consider and understand iterative decision making, which means that your plans will be decided upon as the situation evolves around you. And with that, that allows you then to create plans with optionality. So if we're proceeding down route A and things start to go wrong, we are able to then pivot to route B or route C as we go. We don't stop and then get analysis paralysis while we wait for another decision to come back down from the top. And that involves empowerment of your people to make those decisions. And we call that devolved decision making, which again, from the military term, is something called mission command or Auskragtaktik, which is allowing the general to have clear intent, but the responsibility for decisions gets pushed down to the lowest level possible where the decisions can be made the fastest. And to do all of that, that includes enablement of your people. And it's now in the VUCA world no longer the ability of the executive, the CEO, the C-suite to make those decisions and plans and understand that they will be successful. You have to incorporate the knowledge of all of your people, all levels and different diverse backgrounds, bringing them together. That's going to give you the almost a gold-plated solution. You don't have to pay consultancies to come in and give the answers. They'll just tell you what you want to hear. The answers lie within. And for me today, it's the ability of the seniors, the leaders, the executives to unleash that capability in their people, to allow them to bring their A game. And when you look at the statistics, like I think in America, 79% of people are disengaged at work. That's huge. When you look at some studies that Apple and Google did, a 1% increase in engagement equaled a 1% increase in return on investment, profit. So if you want to talk numbers and impress a CFO, this is what we're talking about. Don't focus on the money, focus on your people, and the money will follow as the people progress, which is why I talked about, I'm very much in the people business and focusing on them. So that's my advice on how to operate in the VUCA world today.
So you talked about the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's where I kind of come into my next question, that I talk about it as like a watershed moment in humanity. A lot shall be talked about in the future as in pre and post-COVID parlance. So how do you think business leaders should look at business differently, keeping in mind, what COVID has brought into the equation?
How do I think they should look at business differently, and how have they? Yeah, let's go back to pre-COVID. So March 2020, myself and my business partner, Bryce Hoffman, author of Red Teaming, we were in London together and he's visiting again end of this month, which is fantastic. But March 2020, we were in London delivering live classes, and we were at the top of a building called Level 39 in Canary Wharf, which overlooks the whole of the London business district. And we've got a great photograph of the two of us with this, the River Thames behind us and all these buildings. And I said to Bryce, I said, and COVID was on TV at the time. The balloon hadn't gone up just yet. It was the following week, but it was all the news. And we just said to each other, how many of these businesses are going to A, be responsive to what's coming and aware, and B, will be around in 2 years' time? And then we saw what happened with the impact of what COVID was. And nobody was prepared for it, despite the warnings, despite the clear understanding of what could happen. We work with the business continuity emergency management teams, and they said, how many people pulled off their BCP, the business continuity plan, looked at the contents, flicked to Appendix D, pandemic response, and they flick to Appendix D, and they get there and it goes, to be confirmed, not yet complete. Because it's one of those things that it's almost that what we call normalcy bias. It can never get that bad. Therefore, we don't really need to plan for it. It's a bit like in the UK. We don't have air conditioning. We don't have quality snowplows because it's never going to snow and it's never going to get hot enough. But when it does, it brings a nation to a grinding halt. So I think COVID, pre-COVID, that was the mentality. Post-COVID, hopefully, people will have recognized that not just the pandemic, but there are incidents out there that can occur that completely derail you. Let's now look at supply chain management. The one ship that got stranded in the Suez Canal and blocked it had a major impact. 98% of the world's goods moves by surface, by the ocean. So how does one incident here impact you, your business, your people? And I think, and I hope, and that's what we're seeing with our clients, is that they've realized COVID was a trigger point for them from a realization of the world we now live in, which goes back to your first question. It amplifies the VUCA world and the nature of the world we're living in. Everything's so hyper-connected, so dynamic, so crazy almost, that post-COVID now we're seeing organizations going, okay, that hurt. Nobody got out of COVID scot-free. Everybody took some pain. Some obviously went under and failed. The ones that didn't we saw the ones who we think, while they see the threats, they also see opportunities. And that's what I love about the red teaming concept. Many of these tools out there make you focus on the threat. So you get heads down in a dark space trying to fight off the threats. You're always on defensive. Whereas if you're doing that, what you're not seeing is these golden opportunities floating by that allow you to grab onto and make hay while the sun shines. And while obviously the impact of COVID was bad, there were opportunities there for companies to do really well. And those that did. And those that failed to see that because they were in almost dark panic mode, it means that they didn't grab hold of them as they floated by and therefore lost or went under. So I think organizations from COVID need to take the understanding that that's just one of many things that is coming. And we've seen since COVID, as I mentioned, these events that are happening globally. There's more around the corner. There's more coming next year. And there's more coming for the rest of our lives, because that's the nature now of the world we live in. So, prepare yourselves as an organization. Goes back to my first response. Ask your people, what do they think might happen? We have a tool called Swan Dive, where we take an event and we topple the dominoes. If X happens, that could have a major impact on us as an organization and a business, what's that going to look like? And you roll the dominoes and start to see them fall, because what normally happens is when these things happen, an event goes off, people just see the first order impact. But what they're not looking at is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And when you look at that, this almost fans out like a domino rally, going all different directions. So one event can have 50 to 100 orders of impact. And if you're not aware of those, if you're only looking at the first 2 or 3 because they're catastrophic, then you're going to miss potentially some of the opportunities that lie in those impactful events. But also then, if you are aware of this, you can come backwards and see, how can we stop this happening? Or potentially, if there's value in it happening, how can we accelerate that as a company to make it valuable for us and bring it forward? So I think from COVID, from these major incidents of the world, and we've seen them in the past, and why I say I've seen them in the past is my worry is that we're not going to learn. We've seen major incidents similar to COVID, but not on that scale globally, but events where when we do the post-mortem, where we're assessing what went wrong and why, and we've seen the casualties from that, we write all these wonderful lesson learned documents, we write all these wonderful after action reports, and then we put them on the shelf, done, dusted, and leave them there. And we don't really change our behaviors afterwards. And that's a travesty, because the opportunities to learn from COVID are huge. And if we don't learn, then we don't evolve and adapt. And as Darwin says, it's not the toughest, the smartest, the most intelligent who survive the change that's coming. It's those that's most adaptive. And I was chatting with a client 2 weeks ago, and he said his concern in his organization is that they have become, military phrase, demob happy. So people are like, yeah, COVID's done, great, everybody out, forget that happened, revert back to normal. And you get people saying, organizations, when are we going back to normal? When are we going back to everybody going into the workplace again? And even if you can do that, the impact of COVID on people and the realization of how they want to live their lives means that we're never going back to that. There is a new normal in a VUCA world that I don't think the majority of executives have really embraced, because of that misunderstanding of what COVID meant, not just for the impact, but for the implications of people and how they now look at things very differently. And depending on your age, experience, where you are in life, family, children, no children, single, want to travel, want to stay location in one location, All of those factors are now impacting and influencing how people want to operate in business. And we're seeing that across from Apple, Google, all the way down to small startups. People's behaviors have changed. And I don't think the recognition of that has been considered fully into planning organizations. And that's where, when we go into our clients now, we're being asked to say, right, help us look at what's next. What's the next COVID? And therefore you run these exercises, and instead of doing the post-mortem, we do the phenomenal pre-mortem exercise that Dr. Gary Klein created 30 years ago now, where you just state disaster has happened. Okay, what could that disaster be? But then the most important thing is, how did that disaster happen? What have we done? What have we behaved like to create that outsourced failure of complete disaster for organization? And when you put a headline newspaper caption up for organizations to say, you are now front page news tomorrow because you failed, that's a wake-up call. And we've all had that wake-up call. So it's real, for me, a reflection and inflection point for businesses to really stop, think, and then understand how they want to proceed going forward. And if that doesn't include engaging all of their people in that, then they're going to miss a trick. And the next COVID, whatever that may look like, will bring the same impact upon them.
So if, the lessons which have been learned or not learned, I would say, from COVID, when you work with leaders in corporate, what are the common mistakes that they make and which frustrates you the most?
I think mistake number one is not thinking. Bryce likes to say, executives have abdicated the role of thinker. And we see this. And what do I mean by that? We've seen this in where we'd rather pay a large consultancy to come in and think on our behalf, which is why one of our quotes is, don't outsource thinking. Don't pay someone else to come in and think on your behalf. A, you're paid the big bucks to do that. B, you've got whatever size your workforce is, you've got a load of great people. And if that's a brand new intern who arrived yesterday, who's 19 years old, go and ask their opinion. A, they have one. B, they'll see things you don't. And C, they'll feel a lot more engaged and take ownership of that. So that's the first thing. Start to think and I don't just mean think, we think 60,000 times a day. I mean, critically think, really engage your brain, because your brain doesn't think critically. When I run classes, I'll say, right, hands up, who thinks they're rational and a critical thinker? And everybody puts their hands up. And I just say, you're not. And then we go through exercises to prove the brain by default is lazy. It takes shortcuts. It likes to satisfy and go with that first option that it will take. And it doesn't take the time to engage and think. And Dr. Daniel Kahneman talks about system 1, system 2 thinking. So system 1 is how we are 95% wired most of the time. It's impulsive, it's intuitive, it's automatic, it's quick. And that's great when you're in a threat environment, when you're in chaos, when you're about to get attacked by a tiger or a bus comes around the corner on the road, you instantly react. But in a VUCA environment, as we talked earlier, reacting in a complex world is often dangerous. So you need to engage system 2, which is more thoughtful, logical, mapped out and understood, and more successful. System 1 is highly error prone. System 2 is far more successful in its outcomes. So that's the first thing. Think in that way of being a critical thinker. Number 2, don't bring in consultancies to do the thinking for you, and don't bring them in to give you the answers. By all means, bring consultancies in for what consultancy was originally created for, to bring expertise in a specific field where you don't have it. Getting them to come in and do your organizational redesign, to do your thinking, to do your, this is the way you do agile transformation. Here's the cookie cutter PDF that we've got off the shelf. Don't do that. Use them for what they're best created for or should be. Number 3, engage your people. And how do we do that? We talk about the 3 C's. We talk about clarity, capability, and culture. And so many organizations, so many executives talk to us and say, hey, Marcus, I want to shift my culture. And I go, okay, where is it? And they point it as if it's got handles and wheels. So we can lift and shift this culture wherever we need to move that. Culture is not a thing that you can move, see, taste. It's an aura of the organization that is created by the input and behaviors of the people within it. So we say, if you want culture, that's the 3rd C. That comes at the end. And to get that right, you have to have The first C, which is clarity. So are you as a leader creating clarity? And that means, as a business, do you have a vision? Do you have a mission and a clear strategy and the roadmap for where that business, that company, that organization is going? Number one. Number two, do your people then within that have clarity of that and understanding? But then are they clear on the problems they're facing? And this goes back to the previous mention of situational awareness. Are you situationally aware of where you're at as a business, where you're at as a company, a nation, an individual? And therefore, do you have clarity at that next level down of what's the problems you're facing? What is it you're trying to achieve? The work that needs to be done. And I've been working with an organization earlier this year in oil and gas, and they had all these great ideas. And my first point was, that's wonderful. Do you understand the work to be done? And then you get this blank look. And they're doing lots of things. Everybody's really busy. But when you challenge it, what is it you're actually doing? And how does that then link back up into the vision? Red teaming, we call it the red thread. If you can't link the work you're doing at the coalface, the frontline operator, if that can't be linked to his managers' initiatives, his directors' initiatives, and the strategic initiatives of the business, then I just say, stop doing it. Find out, stop wasting more time doing that work until you can link that back to something that's positively impacting the higher level intent. Because often as that comes down, you will know from the military, as intent comes down from the CEO, it can often get diluted and watered out, and you get the Chinese whispers of, nobody at the coalface really understands the clear intent from the top because it's being fractioned and disseminated as they go down through the organization. So that's a sort of third point, is use your people, create that clarity. Once you've created that clarity, you then need to create capability. And yes, we hire people for the skills that we want for the role. And then you need to then enable those people to do that. And as Steve Jobs says, we don't hire great people and tell them what to do. We hire great people so they can tell us what to do. And one of the biggest frustrations we talk to in organizations is that they recruit great people, and then after 18 months, that individual's left. And I ask about, what's your churn rate? What's the number of people leaving? And then what's the time from arrival to departure? And they've got this, a lot of people, once they hit the 5-year point, they'll stay forever. But in that first sort of 1 to 3 years, there's a lot of people leaving many organizations. And it's because of exactly that. When you do the exit interviews, it's this frustration where, hey, yeah, they recruited me. They told me that I could come in and I could be innovative. All my skills that I'd learned in my previous role and my technical expertise, I could do X, Y, Z. But then when I spoke up, nobody listened. Then when I spoke up some more, I got shot down. And then when I spoke up some more, because I was really frustrated now, I got sidebarred. I didn't get the bonus I was promised. I got, marginalized into a different role. And so, do you know what? I had a friend who was working at another organization, and he was having none of this. He was doing really well. He'd been promoted. He was doing great work. He was passionate. And we go to the pub together, and he was like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Well, come and work with me. So do you know what? I left and went to work with him. And when you reveal this to organizations, again, those at the top aren't even aware this is occurring, because bad news doesn't travel up. We know it gets filtered, just as the filter works 2 ways. So you've got to have capability. So not only do you recruit people for their skill set, but once they're in the organization, are you enabling what we call craft excellence? Are those individuals really skilled, capable, and allowed to gain experience in the thing they need to do? And this is particularly important in the VUCA world with change management. Everybody can do their sort of day job, but then when we're looking at asking people to change, and we're looking at transformational evolution, sometimes revolution, depending on the speed required of an organization, there's that old great cartoon, isn't it? Who wants to change? Now, who wants change? Everybody puts their hands up. Who wants to change? Nobody puts their hands up. Who wants to lead the change? Everybody leaves the room. This stuff is hard. Making change in people generically is just hard, but as an organizational construct, it's a tough thing to do. And I don't think organizations give it the due seriousness, almost just due focus. You've got your chief exec officer, you've got your chief operations officer. Very rarely do you see a chief transformation officer at that level. It's normally some lower individual who's trying their best, but they're always going to come up against the friction from above, and then they don't have the weight to cascade that capability below. So take change seriously, understand the capabilities that go with change. This isn't just your project manager thing. This is a capability. And again, going back to the consultancy rollout, we're all going agile because that's how we evolve and change in a digital world. Digital transformation, agile transformation, the focus is on the technology and the process of becoming agile. And if you want your project manager to become a product owner, we're moving from project management to product development and delivery. Changing their name from project manager on Friday to product owner on Monday and giving them a 2-day course to sheep dip them does not make them a product manager or product owner. And the frustrations you then see in these people who've almost been lifted and shifted into a new role without that capability uplift is very frustrating. And then when things start to go wrong, the poor teams get blamed, but you fail to upskill them, with the technology, with the processes, with the tools, the techniques, and the thinking. And that's what we've worked with a big, paper company in the US where they try to do agile transformation using project management and product management, ProSci and Scrum.org and whatever these technical capabilities are. And it was just struggling. They weren't getting somewhere. It was like, why is this not working so well? And one of my quotes is, new ways of working don't work with old ways of thinking. So if you're still stuck in your 20th century mindset of how we do linear waterfall project management, pre-VUCA, then in a VUCA world, it doesn't matter if you've got the tools, the processes, and the technology. Think about this. In project management world, it used to be people, process, technology in that order. Now we've flipped it. We're now focusing on technology, digital platforms, cloud, AI, robots, RPA, process, lean, Scrum, agile, Kanban, whatever you want to call it. And then the people sort of, it's sort of an after effect, it's an afterthought. It's like, well, if we get everything right up front, the people just sort of will be driven by the technology. We're not going to let robots take over. They're not capable. This isn't Skynet Terminator. You still need people. And one of the conversations I'll have a group of people say, right, everybody, what business are you in? They'll all walk around the room, say, I'm accounts, I'm engineering, I'm this. I'm go, you're all wrong. No. They look at me like, how the hell does he know what business I'm in? I know better. And I just say, you're all in the people business. And the fact none of you said that shows that you're not considering your greatest asset. That's not the money you've got in the bank. That's not your offering to your customers. The greatest asset any organization has is its people. So if you don't enable the capability of those people in both physical, technical, and mental, cognitive capability aspects, then you are always going to be holding them back, holding yourselves back. And whatever you bolt on from the outside, sort of 70 to 80% of what's going wrong in your company, what can be improved, is an internal mechanistic shift of your people and how you improve that capability. And then get that right. And then that moves into the culture. So first organization we walk into, hey, we want this with our culture. And I'll go, okay, are your people clear on what they're doing? Do they have the capability? And the answers to both of those are invariably no. And if you just want to go back and today check that in your organization, are your people clear on their vision, strategy, and purpose, and clear on the problems they're facing in the next 12 months, broken down by quarter to understand the work they need to do? I'll go out on a limb. I'll say 90% of organizations, the answer to that will be no. So that's an epic failing on the organizational leadership for not enabling that understanding of clarity. And then if I go and ask your people to do the jobs they have to do they have the capability to do that, both physically and cognitively? Physically, they may have a few tools that have been thrown in and forced upon them, and they're not still sure how to use them. Look at all the tools that are out there today. Highly complicated tools, not even simplified for use by the operator. That causes confusion. And then mentally, cognitively, do they have the ability to think? I'll tell you this, yes, they all do. Are they allowed to think? Goes back to my conversation about the individual who left the company. So many people have great ideas. So many people are innovative. So many people are passionate and want to help. This is why they work for you. They believe in what you're doing. They want to go make a difference. Nobody gets out of bed in the morning and say, I'm going to go to work today and mess things up. And unless you're a complete psychopath, right? People want to go. They want to help. And in doing so, they want to have the recognition for doing that. They want to feel part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be part of a team. And they want to make a difference. And if you don't foster that behavior, if you don't foster that beautiful human trait that is wanting to do good with others, then that person very quickly moves into a dark space. They will quickly lose that passion, and they will either leave or they become what I call like sheep-like passivity. They just go, do you know what? I'm not bothered. It's pointless. But I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got kids to feed. I've got commitments. I can't fight. I'm not willing to put my head above because no one else is supporting me. And another great quote from Daniel Kahneman is, you have to protect your dissenters. You know, if you're not allowing dissent in your organization, Patrick Lencioni, 5 dysfunctions of a team, right? Foundation is trust. Second one is conflict. And people go, oh, conflict. We can't have conflict. We've got to be nice and kind. I can still be nice and kind to you today, Prashant, while still having conflict with each other. We can have good discourse. This art of contradiction between humans that we are built to do. We're built to disagree with each other. We're built to challenge each other and think differently, because you and I think very differently. You will know things that I will never know in a million years, and likewise, I'll be the same. Smash those brains together and greatness will come out of that. So if you're not enabling that, if you're not allowing people to have that discourse and healthy conflict because it's seen as a bad thing, or when people do, you get that great, hey, Marcus, you're not a team player because you're disagreeing in an agreement. Hey, Marcus, you need to pipe down and know your place. Well, hang on a minute. I've got a great idea. And it doesn't matter how many great ideas you've got in your organization. If they're not allowed to be surfaced, then it means nothing. And that poor individual, I call it the Terminator red eye. That eye will just go zzz, and they'll shut down. And you walk into an organization and you sense, you're going to sense the culture, you will sense mediocrity. It's just this low level of, I come in, I do my job, I go home. I don't put my head above the parapet. I do the minimal work required. Wow, what outcome are you going to get from that? And that goes back to that initial, 79% of people aren't engaged at work. Well, that's why, and that's what you get. So for me, they're the sort of list of things to really focus on, but it ultimately comes down to your people and how you engage and enable them to get on board. And there's some great organizations where they've got shadow boards. Let's talk about boards today. I use this acronym that gets a reaction, the SPOMS, the stale, pale, old males. All right, 97% of C-suites are now still males from a certain generation. We know this. And, while it's a derogatory term, it's a fact. I'll take any challenge on that. And there are some pale females of the same era, but it's invariably the SPOMs. And you know what? Being a POM's okay. I'm a POM. I'm a pale old male. The criminal activity in all of this is becoming stale. And if you've allowed yourself to become stale, then you are failing both yourself, but most importantly, in the position you're in up here, you're failing your organization and your people. And we had a great call with a chief security information officer from a company last week. He'll be on the podcast real soon. And we were talking about, how do you, and he's older than me and he's paler than me, right? But he's far from stale. I said, Mick, how do you maintain, this level of understanding? And he said, I spend 1 hour a day on personal improvement. Whether that's scouring LinkedIn, reading something, online training, but he's just constantly aware. And he's got this great saying. He says, I knew I had to do this. And he's in the tech world. It says, I've got this, probably 4 or 5 generations working between him and the new coalface, super smart kids coming out of university, sharp as anything, 21 years old. They will challenge. And they are not constrained by the organizational legacy yet. And he said, Marcus, I was chatting with these guys the other day, and he said, I realized not only were we not looking out of the same window as each other, he goes, we weren't even in the same building. I was so far removed, and me and my leadership compadres were so distanced from the reality of what was going on in the organization that I had to do something. And I said, if we don't realign the organization, this is what's happened in the last 20 years. We look at the pace and speed of change. We talk about a 2-speed organization. It's even more emphatic now because you are moving generationally apart and therefore cognitively apart. And at the top, if they're not understanding what's going on as much as the coalface is understanding, then you get that huge disconnect, and the frustrations become even more so because actually the people leading the business are the ones doing the work and should be, but they're not allowed to. And therefore having that understanding of where that power gradient now becomes, rather than vertical, needs to become far more shallow to allow what we come back to talking earlier, mission command. Commander's intent, CEO's intent. Can you just give clear intent? Can you give direction, clarity, capability, off you go, and allow people to do what they need to do? And if you can't do that, ask why and ask what you need to do to enable that.
I'm sure you must have worked your magic over multiple projects in the time that you have spent. I want you to share with all of us which one is closest to your heart and why.
Which one's closest to my heart and why? I've got a couple, actually. I've got one pre-red teaming, which I'll talk about, and then I've got another one post. So about 5-6 years ago now, we were working in a large bank in an organization, again, looking at agile transformation and change management. And, we were the sort of maverick outfit. We had a great leader came in, brought in for his ability to think differently. And we grew a team of 200. And we operated outside of the rule book, doing great things, creating great teams, good people, engaged people. And we were sort of looked at as the black sheep almost of the organization. People, what are they doing? And I remember at one point, audit came to see us. And we'd been warned, audit were coming in, and audit in a bank is a big thing. It's sort of next step down from the regulators coming in. And I remember these two lovely ladies turn up, and they were quite to the point. They were from Yorkshire like I am, so we were very direct. And they went, "Hello, come to see you. We were here for 2 weeks. We've heard it's like the wild bloody West in here." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Yeah, we've heard that you guys are all cowboys. We heard you're cutting corners, you're doing this, you're doing that." I'm like, "Okay, if that's what you've heard." And what that was the rumor control from those around us outside who were behaving differently and couldn't understand how we were doing what we were doing without cutting corners. And I was like, "Okay." And I said, "Come on in. What's mine is yours. We'll share everything. We'll show you everything. We've got nothing to hide here." And these two ladies spent 2 weeks with us. And at the end of it, they left. We got a glowing report, all the actions that were needed to be done, nothing severe, but we had a list of actions that needed to be completed. The way we were working, the way we were tracking work, we created a board for all that work to be done, linked those ladies into it. So instead of them having to chase us up, where we're at with this, where we're at with that, they were getting these generic updates daily sent to them. I created a dashboard on their computer for them. And they were like, "Wow, this is just," they couldn't, their mindset was just so far away from what we were doing because of their institutionalized behaviors within the hierarchy of the bank they'd been working in, that it was just like almost incomprehensible for them this could be done. So once we'd done that and got the glowing report, and then it was official, it was like, okay, now how do we make that work for everybody else? So we did that for 200 people. And then the next step was taking that to 18,000 people, which over the next 2 years we did very quickly. And we got a group of people, created a hub of quality individuals who were, going back to clear. They had the clarity of what was needed. We had great top-down direction. We had the capability. We hired, we recruited, we brought in the skilled operators who'd gone through this, were part of the business. We didn't bring in consultants to do this. We had the individuals who had the knowledge of the bank. We had individuals who'd gone through this in the team for the last 2 years. We had individuals coming outside who brought different perspectives. And then instead of being that hub doing it, we then created bespoke opportunities. So we went out to the different areas of the business who wanted this and created the connection points at their end, built relationships with them. So they became the advocates of that within their departments. And then all you almost create, you create this conduit between them and the hub. I called us the octopus. You've got these arms going out every day, touching and feeling around the business to say, hey, where's this happening? What's going on here? And then that information's coming in. And where you're learning one thing in one area, that came back to the hub and then got disseminated. So it's this collective learning where in the VUCA world, we talk about probing, experimenting, test and learn, perfect world for agility. Why should I keep learning and testing and failing in my own when I'm working in a massive organization, that's fine when there's two of us in a garage as a startup. But when there's thousands of other people doing stuff, somebody somewhere knows. And this goes back to empowering your people to surface. So you start creating communities of practice where, hey, I'm struggling with this. Struggle no more. Let me introduce you to Steve and Jeff over here and Sandra and Bob over here. They've done it. They've created good practice, and then we come together, fuse that, share that again, and then that just keeps evolving. So you keep the elevation of capability continually going upwards, because there's no such thing as best practice. You can always make something better, but understand what good practice is. It's good enough to get you going. But then as you improve it, go back to the individual who helped you and help them. And we called it climbing the rungs of the ladder. We said, right, we've got to get to rung 10. That's our target. When we're all on the top of the ladder, we're all at a baseline capability of, alignment, understanding, clarity, capability, tooling, you name it. So when you're climbing that ladder, if there's 50 of us climbing 50 ladders, and I said this was a protocol. I said, if anybody gets 2 rungs ahead of anyone else, you stop. And you look back and you go, hey, everybody, look at me. I got here because I did these things. Let me share this with you and see if it helps. And then you wait for questioning. You go and support them if you need to do. And that's what the hub was. The hub would descend out as squads to support the spoke areas where they were struggling. And then you go, right, is everybody climbing again? Right, we're all climbing. So it's that incremental small steps of the whole group, across 18,000 people. And it's irrelevant whether it's 10 or 10 million. If you apply that same fundamental principle of, go back to slow down to speed up. I'm going fast, right? Stop, look around. Situational awareness. I'm on my own here. Why am I so far ahead of the pack? Old school behavior. Great. I'm ahead of the pack. Go faster. Get me to the end. So I'm the victor. Way. You don't win if you get there on your own. We win when we get there together as a group in the ways of working that we are looking at today. So if you're ahead, why are you ahead? Look back and help and share that love. And then funny old thing, month ahead, you're behind. You're struggling to get to that next rung of the ladder. Somebody's come across and help you. So you get this collective group behavior. And instead of getting groupthink, where everybody's conforming, everybody's heads down, you get this wisdom of the crowd that's allowed to be shared. And that's what we created. And I left there in 2018, and I know that is still in place and working and growing much broader across the business. So that's one of my sort of good news stories that I'm really proud of. And the people who were there, I still communicate with all of them. One of them's getting married in 2 weeks out in Canada. And it's just lovely that we've still got that connectivity because we focused on each other first. We knew what the mission was, but we built the team. We engaged with each other on a personal level. We understood what each other brought to the party. And then we made sure we went forward as one. So that's pre-red teaming. Post-red teaming, we've got a great relationship with a company called Media Brands. If you check out our podcast, Red Team TV, you'll see Christian Johansson, who's their CEO of the EMEA region. Christian came across Bryce's book, and he read this book in his previous job, had it all dog-eared and tabbed and labeled and scribbled notes all over it, and was using that to great effect on his own. Because the beauty of these tools are you can use them on your own to make yourself a far more competent, capable operator. And then when he got promoted and posted into this role of the CEO, he literally bought all of his C-suite the book and said, right, everybody, take this book away, digest it. I want to hear your thoughts, but I'd like this to become a sort of way of operating for us as a group. He did that. He then put himself through our training on his own time, on his own dollar. All right. So he came through, did the training with us. Then he got us in to do a just 2 half-day session with his C-suite. Did that. That was well received. Then he got us in to do the executive of all his country leads. So across Europe, Africa, Middle East, all of his country leads. So it almost covered the sort of top third of his pyramid, if you think about the hierarchical structure of an organization. So that meant that you had executive understanding and buy-in and appreciation of what this capability now is. And then what he did was, right, I want this across my whole organization. And what you can't do is have us come in and then teach everyone that. That's not what we do. We're all about teach a man to fish and let them go fishing. So from that, we created what we call it the Red Team Thinking Champions Program. They called it their Applied Critical Thinking, ACT Champions. and they handpicked individuals from each of their country regions, and then they put them together, and then we ran a champions program for them. So we taught them all the tools and techniques, but also we taught them how to teach. It was very much a train-the-trainer program. And then how that works is they go back to their countries. So they've now got the top-down support above. They've got the understanding of the executive. And then they can start to do this in their own teams and help and train people. And tools are so simple that I teach you a tool today, you're using it tomorrow and also able to instruct others how to use it. And how that works really is the intent of how the army did this. The army used to train their majors because they said, the majors are the people in the middle of an organization who've got the ability to cascade down and influence, but also they're going to go up. But also providing that top cover, Christian seniors understood what was going on because, as you may well know, sort of red teaming can be quite a antagonistic thing if you don't understand it. It can be quite a threat. And we've seen organizations where the execs go, what the hell are you doing? Why are you red teaming my plan? Thinking it's something to destroy their plan, where actually we know it's about making the plan better. But if you're not aware of that, you can get quite defensive. So if the executive above know what's going on and they see things being challenged, they know it's being challenged for the right reason. They know that challenge is going to follow with a recommendation. As we say, we never do anything, go, right, that plan's rubbish, it won't work. Get rid of it. We go, right, that plan won't work right now. But we've dissected it. We've challenged all the elements. We've understood all the different intricacies of what's going on. And by doing that analysis, we put it back together and here's some recommendations now to make it better. We never make a better plan. We make your plan better. And understanding that, you get the executive relaxing because they know good work's going on for the right intentions. But the key of this is you now get people engaging. You get people taking ownership and responsibility because Christian's cascaded down to his C-suite. They've cascaded it down to their directors, and they've cascaded it now down to their team levels to say, hey guys, get on with this. You are now empowered. You've got the skills. Your red team champions are here, there, and everywhere dotted across Europe. If you want information, contact them, call them, and they'll provide you with that expertise. And that's working really well. And what was lovely, we did this last year remotely. And then Christian flew them all into London in March. So myself and one of my other instructors, Ellie, got to go to London, meet them all, spent a day in a workshop with them. And then we all went out for dinner at night. And what was really nice, Christian came along, first time that most people in the organization had met the CEO, let alone see him. And we were doing the old table rotation where you're having each course and you're moving around, and Christian was sitting and talking to everybody. And he left and went home. And one of the guys went, that guy's for real, isn't he? They'd heard all the stuff before, they'd seen it, but until you actually hear it, you're like, how can an executive behave this way? How can an executive want me to do so much? And I said, well, that's the mindset shift. And I think Christian is one of our almost panacea behaviors of an executive today. Going back to exactly what we've been talking about, is VUCA world, you have to behave like that. And Christian quite openly goes, hey guys, don't look at me for all the answers. My job as a CEO no longer is to lead clearly in the direction I say we're going. My job is to enable all of you to allow that to happen. And here's how I want to do it. And when he had that openness and people saw that A, he was a human, B, he'll talk to them as a human, and C, he will enable them and invest in their time. This investment in their capability was so important for him, because by doing that, he can now sit back and see what's happening. And now they're taking this out as a media company. They're offering this as a USP for them. Not only do we do your media, when we're discussing with you as a client, we will also bring these tools to the bear and help you use these tools in your organization as a client. So it's a real, almost a 2-for-1 that they're taking out to the marketplace, which is a great thing to see. So they're my two good news stories, if you will.
Thanks for sharing. I think the next question comes at a very opportune moment when you talked about Christian in such detail. Which business leader, dead or alive, has inspired you the most, and how?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. There are many, aren't there, really? Which one the most? Okay, I'm going to go with my namesake on this one. I'm going to go with Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor, one of the main founders and believers and orchestrators of Stoicism, Stoic beliefs. And the guy's got more quotes. If you read, the books on him, on Stoicism, his behaviors, his teachings. And I think one of my favorite quotes was his, and I'm making this up, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And if you read his book, Meditations, there's so many in there. And I think it really goes back to this. You have to take accountability. You've got to stop moaning, stop blaming other people. If something's happening out there and it's having this impact on me, fine. Change your thought process, change how you're seeing things. What can you do to make that different? Don't sit on the sidelines. Get into that other Teddy Roosevelt quote, get into the arena. Stop being that armchair general. Stop being that external businessman reading the Times on a Sunday morning. Go, I would have done that. Okay, well, do something. What would you do? And that's what I love about the red team thinking concept, is it's allowing people to create their own happiness by changing their thoughts. And by doing that, it's allowing organizations and Christian to evolve the happiness of their organization. A happy organization is a fun place to be. It's an effective place to be. And you can sense it again when you walk into organizations, whether a culture is learning, evolutionary, and happy versus whether it's toxic, malevolent, and silent. You can very quickly sense that in a day. You don't have to walk around, have a couple of conversations and coffees, and you get that. So I think for me, sort of Marcus Aurelius, if I had to pick one individual, if I had to pick one set of books and readings to take away to my desert island, I'd pick Marcus Aurelius, aligned to the sort of Stoics and the Stoicism. And if you look at the 4 virtues of Stoicism, wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. And if you just unpick each of those in turn, I won't go because we could spend another hour talking about those. But if you just understand those from a personal aspect, if you understand what they mean to you and you bring your A game in each of those areas, doing the right thing from a justice perspective, having the wisdom, the knowledge. Where does wisdom come from? Right? That's the end game. You have to have, information, turn that into knowledge, turn that into experience. Experience brings wisdom. All of those things come together. So for me, Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism. Read up on that if you haven't. Highly recommend it.
Sure, I will do that. And this one's coming from the bottom of my heart. I have felt with so much of impetus that we've had on financial outcomes like top line, bottom line, the key constant of people sometimes takes a back seat in today's age. What do you have to say about this? Especially being a people person, I think you'll be able to connect with this.
Makes my blood boil, Prashant. You go into organizations, and I had this 2 days ago, metrics. What are the executives measuring? What are the drivers of their quarterly review, the QBR, quarterly business review? It's all about the bottom line. And it's all about where are the beans going in the jar? How many beans are going in the jar? What's our profit? What's the return on investment? And it's all focused on money. And the more we focus on money in a VUCA world, the less you're going to make. And sadly, it's done in too short a time frame. It's quarterly. You can't get the impact you want to see from your people in that time frame. 2, it's not playing the long game. And because they're all answering to shareholders and stakeholders in certain timeframes, and they've all got their own targets in the next 1, 2, 5 years, if you don't play the 5-year game of, mapping out that business trajectory, what's going to be along that roadmap along the way, and focus on the outcome rather than these short-term outputs of, we sold 50 widgets next month. Well, so what? What does that mean? What's the outcome that's trying to achieve? So I think this, again, for me, the pivot away from mechanistic behaviors to cognitive, we have to move away from very, figures driven to outcome driven. And that outcome comes from your people. As I said, you want to talk money, don't talk about how much we made, talk about how much you lost through churn rate. When I ask that question, I have to fight to get that data. Funny old thing. Why? Because HR don't want to release that data, because I'm going to take that data to the C-suite and go, look, stop moaning about how many things you sold last month, right? That's irrelevant. You lost double that in the training costs for the people that all left in January. They're like, what? I said, oh yeah, it costs 50,000 to recruit and train and get someone onto your shop floor. Okay, you lost 10 last month. That's 500,000, right? Over a year, that's 6 million on churn rate. And you can scale this up or down. I'm just using an example right now. Are you aware of this? Oh no, so it's opportunity costs that they're not seeing and focusing on the wrong things. So I think focus on the outcomes you're trying to achieve. How do you get your people to enable that, and then give them the clear metrics to allow them? When we talk about agile metrics, not how many people, what's our agile organizations index? What do you mean? Well, how agile are we? Well, how do you measure that? Well, they do. They have how many people have gone through the 2-day certification training? 100%. Well, does that mean you're fully agile? Not at all. Goes back to there's no wisdom, experience, or knowledge in that. You've just been given a certificate. So be very wary of these metrics that are often very easy to tick. And I think somebody showed it yesterday. Someone said, sheep dipped, box ticked, chaos. Because the first two, yep, done that, tick. Boxes tick, yep, done that. But then you create chaos because you're measuring and creating the wrong things. So I think that's a really important thing. And again, goes back to that SPOM mindset. The boards of old have been brought up through thinking that that's what it's all about. It's all about the bottom line, right? And while it is, if you're shifting to a purpose-driven organization rather than a money-driven one, follow the people and the money will follow. Yeah, and it's like Richard Branson says, Richard Branson doesn't care about his customers. He cares about his people. He said it's their job to care about the customer. If I create great people, they'll bring happy customers, they'll bring money. If I focus on the money, beyond the customer, beyond my people, I'm missing out on the two most important things. And you look at customer now, customer commitment, customer allegiance to a brand, that's where organizations are really making their mark. You look at Delta, look at Gymshark, look at Apple. How have they done that? And it's not by being focusing on the cash, it's being focused on the people, the quality of their offering to get the constant buy-in from the customers.
At the end, I would like to, have you expand on your life rules, which you shared with me on a reaction to a post of mine on LinkedIn. Time for you to share those with all of us.
Okay, I knew you'd ask this. So as I brought them along. See that? And that's not me. That was a present to me from my children, because I've been hammering it into them for many a year. So my life rules are, so rule number 1, always do the right thing. Rule number 2, if you're going to do something, do it right. And then rule number 3, always have fun. And they're real simple. And when I was teaching this to my teenage son, he's like, they're real easy, Dad. And now one of them's going through the army, one of them's a general manager in hospitality. And then when I spoke to him recently, he said, Dad, they're a lot harder than they appear when written down, aren't they? And it goes back to that first thing. Number 1, always do the right thing. But what is the right thing? When is the right thing to be done? And that goes back to, you can't do that without thinking. You can't do that without thinking critically, without having situational awareness, self-awareness, and awareness of others. And often doing the right thing doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. It's the right thing for your organization. It's the right thing for your group of people. It might mean that you take a bit of a hit. You might take some pain or personal loss, but collectively, goes back to climbing the ladder, we're doing the right thing for everyone around us. And therefore, by doing that, ultimately, you'll benefit. Second point, if you're going to do something, do it right. Don't cut corners. You will. Your brain will want you to, because as I said earlier on, your brain's lazy. It'll look for the shortcut. It'll look to do the minimum it can. And often that means not getting the best thing out of you. So if you are going to do something, understand what needs to be done and then do it right. Because if you don't, and that might take a little bit more time, but often if you don't do these things right, when that goes wrong, or when the wheels come off or the lid blows off downrange, to fix that, it's going to take you a lot longer. And it goes back to engaging your people. If you're going to roll out a big, you're going to do a £5 billion program to roll out for the next 3 years. If you spend a day planning that, it's probably not going to go well. If you take the time to do that right, to get your people in and spend 5 days, 10 days on an offsite, away from work, focusing on what you're trying to achieve. And in doing that, you engage all of your people. You engage the people who are going to be doing it, execution of this plan, and you get their input. You're now creating ownership, accountability, engagement, and people are going to enjoy being part of that. So the time taken to do that right will mean that that 3-year plan stays on track. It will meander. If you don't do that, within 3 months, that plan is going to be so far off track, you won't know where you're going. And the cost to recover that is huge. The time cost, the financial cost, but more important to my heart is the mental cost of the people involved in that. We've all seen that. I've seen product managers beaten down and demoralized because of this. And they were like, well, we told you this at the start. If you'd have allowed us to do what we wanted to do, we wouldn't be here now. So you're losing a lot of mental capital by not doing things right. Because again, under this cosh of speed, under this cosh of do it now, we're not taking the time, and time spent in the military, we say time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted. I say time spent thinking is seldom wasted because it's going to allow you to accelerate. And then the third thing, have fun. Jesus, if you're not having fun, then go and find somewhere that you will. And again, organizations, if having fun is a crime in your organization, if somebody sees you and your team having a laugh, making jokes, a bit of levity, which is going back to my story about when I was in the big bank, we were seen as that team who were having too much of a good time. That's not allowed here. Why are they enjoying themselves? I'm not. That's your problem. Going back to Marcus Aurelius, right? Don't let your thoughts from what you're seeing me do affect you. That's your problem. Go and find a way to have fun. So I think it's really important to have fun in what you're doing. Doesn't mean you're not taking it seriously. I had more fun at my dad's funeral than I've had at most parties. I had fun with people. We had stories to tell, to engage. In the military, we've got this sort of sixth sense of humor where whatever you're doing in combat, you're having fun. You're making light of these things because some of these things are hard, and a bit of levity, a bit of a good laugh can help a lot of people mentally, psychologically, and effectively. I've never yet met a happy team that doesn't deliver, ever. So they're my 3 rules. Always do the right thing. If you're going to do something, do it right. And then finally, have fun. And they'll pretty much do you well in any walk of life.
This has been a very enriching and stimulating discourse, and I'm sure the viewers will have a lot of take-home messages as well as food for introspective thoughts. Thanks once again for taking our time for this discussion, and look forward to being in touch with you in the future too. And Brilliant. For the viewers, do share your love and affection through likes, shares, comments, and subscription to the channel. It means the world to me. And until we meet again, stay inspired.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure being here.
Thank you.